Yo YouTube, what is up? My name is Scott Adamson, and if you've been following along with the channel at all, you'll know that I'm currently building out a 2019 144 Mercedes Sprinter van 4x4. In today's video, I kind of thought that I would go over sort of the sizing, selecting, and placement of all of the water tanks in your van build. So let's roll that intro, and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, so I'm getting to the point in my build where I have to start making decisions on sort of my plumbing and water capacity. My first van build, I was a 170. I'm now going down to a 144, and I've made a few different changes in my layout. So I'm going to be talking about my 170 van, my first van, which I still have, what I did on that van, and then what I'm doing on the 144 van that's differently. So in today's video, I'm going to sort of talk about, sizing, placement, and selecting your water tanks. So when it comes to types of water tanks, you kind of have two categories. Number one I'm going to talk about is materials. So there's kind of two materials of tanks that I'm most familiar with. One of them is plastic water tanks, and the other one is stainless steel water tanks. Those are the two that I'm aware of. There might be other materials or tank types, but as far as I know, those are the two most common. Stainless steel water tanks I'm not going to talk about too much because I have never used them. I'm going to assume that most people use stainless steel tanks when they're looking to get something custom fabricated to fit a unique space. So I think most people, if they want something custom, that is when they'd go the stainless steel route. But overall, your most cost-effective option is if you can source a sort of standard size plastic water tank that's going to fit your needs, is going to give you sort of the best bang for your buck. And that's the route that I've chosen to go on both my previous 170 van for the 3 tanks and on my new 144 van. So the benefit of plastic water tanks is they are very easily sourced and they come in tons of different shapes, sizes. In the past, I've always gotten my tanks at the website. It's plasticwatertanks.com, so it's super easy to remember. Check out the website. And you might have noticed on my new van build, I'm using a pretty unique tank, and this tank is designed that it fits actually right over top of the wheel well in the van. And it just sort of maximizes the space in the van. And going down to the 144 van, that was something that was really important to me, was to maximize the space. So the guys over at Northwest Conversions, you've probably seen these tanks on Instagram and YouTube before. Those are the guys that sell these tanks, and they are amazing. They come in, I don't know all the sizes they come in, I'll figure that out for you in a second, but I ended up going with the 32 gallon over the wheel well tank for my freshwater tank. And my other tanks will come from plasticwatertanks.com. But for my freshwater primary storage, I went with the 32 gallon over wheel well freshwater tank, and I'm super excited about it. So now that we've got the types of tanks sorted out by material, we've got plastic and stainless steel. Now we have to talk about the types of tanks based on what they're holding. So you kind of have 3 categories. You've got freshwater tank, you've got a gray water tank, and you've got your black water tank. All right, so now let's go over the types of tanks in the van. Let's start talking about my 177 Sprinter van and what I did there. So if you look at that van, I have a 25 gallon freshwater tank that is stored underneath the vehicle. And that tank, when you are configuring it from plastic water tanks, you do have some flexibility in the types of fittings they put in that tank for you. So that's something you're going to want to be aware of. In the freshwater tank, you're going to want to have a drain, which is on the low side of the tank. The drain, typically, you also would do that be your sort of intake. That's where the pump would suck from, is the same as the drain. I'll show you that a little closer. And then you're also going to want to fill. The fill will be at the top. And you're also going to want to vent, because you need a vent so you don't create a bunch of pressure or a siphoning effect inside the freshwater tank. So those are kind of the 3 parts of the tank that you need to make sure that you have covered. The gray water tank is a little bit different because, so I believe it's a 22 gallon gray water tank on my van, and that one is actually located between the wheel wells. I took off the spare tire and put it where the spare tire was, and I relocated the spare tire to the rear door to maximize that. So into my gray water tank, again, I have the shower water. The shower water, that drops straight down into the gray water tank because it's located directly below the shower. So that's using an 1.5 inch, I believe it's an 1.5 inch PVC pipe that just drops straight into the tank. And then I also have into the side of the tank near the top, as high as I could get it, is where I have the sink, and that goes in through another 1.5-inch hole. If I was to do this over again, I wouldn't do 1.5 inches running all the way from the sink. It's nice because it doesn't get clogged, but I think you could get away with using a bit thinner drain as long as you had the ability to unclog it. So, and then last but not least is my Blackwater tank, which is a 12-gallon Blackwater tank, and that basically just has a straight, it's located right below my RV Dometic toilet, and that goes, it's just a straight shot down in, so it doesn't have to travel anywhere. So it's just a 3-inch piece of black plumber's pipe, and that is using a friction fit into the top of the tank and a inserted seal. I'll see if I can find some pictures of that to throw it up on the screen. All right, next up we're going to talk about sizing the tanks on your van. So since a lot of people aren't going to use a Blackwater tank and they're not going to have a flush toilet, they're either going to use a cassette toilet and just dump the cassette, or they've got some other system that they're going to use. Maybe it's a compost toilet, or maybe they're just not even going to have a toilet, which is fairly common. So my tank, I'll just leave the link to it like I did before. I went with a 12-liter Blackwater tank. Basically, depending on usage, gives me about, I'd say 10 to 14 days between having to dump the Blackwater tank. And that's with fairly regular usage, so just keep that in mind. So it does give me, I try to pair up all my systems so that, I get about 2 weeks of fresh water, 2 weeks of gray water storage, and 2 weeks of Blackwater storage. So everything kind of stays in sync with each other. Nothing is. So now let's talk about our freshwater and our gray water tanks. In order to really understand your water consumption needs, one sort of metric that you're going to need to understand is called gallons per minute, or GPM. If you're looking at any kind of your faucets or your pump, any plumbing device that has water passing through it, you're going to notice that it's got a rating for gallons per minute, and that is basically the output of that device. So a pump's going to tell you, how many gallons per minute it's able to pump. A faucet's going to tell you, if when you open it full blast, how many gallons per minute are coming out of that pump. So what that enables you to start doing is you're able to kind of start figuring out, if I'm using this many gallons because I have the tap on for this many minutes, how much water am I using up? So let me break down an example for you, and I'll do my best to kind of explain it. So let's use the shower example because that's probably the easiest to break down and understand. But if you take a regular shower head, for example, its capacity or output or gallons per minute is usually around 2.5. So that means that if you were to have a 2-minute shower, that you would use 5 gallons of water. So then, assuming that you shower every day, which you don't in a van, but for just this basic math, let's pretend that you do. That's 5 gallons of water per shower times 7 days a week. That's 35 gallons of water just on showering alone with a regular shower head. And then you have to factor things in, 2-minute shower, you can really speed that up in the van. Is there 2 people showering, or are you traveling alone? How often are you showering? But let's use the 35 gallons as the example, sort of the baseline for. So now if we just make a simple switch and we go to a low flow shower head, which you can get a lot of low flow shower heads in the 1.2 to 1.5 gallon per minute range. I'll link the one that I use below. It's a super good shower head. The thing with low flow shower heads is that sometimes they feel like they're barely getting any water on you, especially when you're showering. But this low flow shower head, forget the company name, but it's actually won awards. It's specifically designed to make it so a low flow shower head still feels like a real shower, and it does a great job at that. So if we take those 1.5 gallon per minute shower heads and we're having that same 2-minute shower every day, now we're using 3 gallons of water. And over a 7-day period, that's only 21 gallons of water we've used as opposed to the 35. So just by switching from like a low flow, switching from a regular flow to a low flow shower head, we've saved ourselves a ton of water in the van. So for me, I know that I said that I have 25 gallon tank, it's a freshwater tank, but in reality, that's my underneath storage. I do have another 10-gallon hot water tank in the van that I can use as additional fresh water storage, because when the whole water's full, when the whole system's full, that has water in it. So I actually built a system where I can pressurize it and force that water out when I need. So that goes from 25 to 35 gallons. And then I do carry another 6-gallon jug inside the van. So my effective freshwater storage is actually closer to 40 gallons. So that's kind of the number that I'm going to baseline the rest of my sort of information off of, is my 40-gallon freshwater storage capacity. All right, so let's look at a typical week for me in the van. Again, I don't shower every day. I'm more of a 2 to 3 times a week shower guy in the van, depending on what I'm doing. So I'm going to use a number as, I would say, about 6 gallons a week. I keep my showers really short. I do kind of the military style shower where I go in, turn it on, get wet, shower off, soap up, shower on, rinse off. On top of that, you also have your drinking water. And then I've got Ellie as well. So that's another about half gallon that Ellie drinks a day. So I budget around 1.5 gallons a day of drinking water, which is probably pretty fair. You know, if people have 2 people in the van that don't actively focus on drinking that much water that you're going to consume. So for me, that's 1.5 gallons of drinking water per day, which works out to about 10.5 gallons per week. Then we have dishes, and depending on how you manage your dishes and stuff like that, if you haven't seen it already, I do have a bit of a van hacks video that I'll link up above here. That video kind of talks about how I conserve water when I'm doing dishes, because I don't really want to be wasting water on doing dishes. But I kind of budget for me doing water about another 4 gallons a week. So in total, if you add that all up, I'm using about 22 gallons a week. I have roughly 40 liters of storage. So that means I get about 2 weeks between having to refuel. Again, you can stretch out the drinking water, the showers, but for me, as I mentioned before, my system is kind of built around, I'd like to be able to last sort of those 2-week stints in between having to sort of cycle over, fill up and dump my water system. So that's kind of the math that I use to come up with that number. When it comes to your gray water tanks, I'm going to make the assumption that you're probably, when you fill up your freshwater tanks, you're probably in a place where you could be also dumping the gray water tanks. So I also like to sort of plan my capacity that I have enough gray water storage to match my freshwater storage. But there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. Again, you're drinking 10.5 gallons per day. Some of my showers are outside. And that's all water that's not going into the gray water tank. That's water that is just going onto the ground or in my body. So once you factor that in, I'm totally comfortable. I have a 20-gallon gray water tank, and that's been more than enough. I think in the 144 van, I'm probably going to go down maybe to like something around 15 gallons. I'm going to check out plasticwatertanks.com and sort of see what matches kind of the specs and the space that I have. Another thing to consider with your water tank placement is inside the van versus outside the van. It's really easy to put the tanks underneath the van because it doesn't take up any space in the van. They're out of sight, out of mind. You have all the storage in the van. The problem only comes up when you want to start doing some winter travel. And that's why I eventually added I have those 2 sort of auxiliary tanks inside the van. I added that afterwards because my freshwater tank that was located underneath the vehicle, I couldn't use that when I was in winter climates and snowboarding because risk of freezing, the pipes would freeze. It didn't work. So I had to sort of add on this secondary system that allows me to shut off the main storage tank, and then I just use the 6-gallon auxiliary tank and my 10-gallon hot water tank. So I have 16 gallons of fresh water in sort of my winter setup. But that's why that's how my 25 turns into 40. And that's why I had to do it. So if you can, I highly recommend getting your freshwater water source inside the van, even though it takes up a lot of space if you plan on doing any winter camping. I still plan on having my gray water underneath the van in the wheel well spot, as I mentioned before, but the freshwater tank, that's the important one. That's the one you really want to get inside the van. And the last thing I wanted to go over was just location and weight of these water tanks. That's one thing a lot of people, they don't think about when they're planning out their van build is, what side of the van, where am I going to put it, what's my weight distribution like. But if you look at my 170 van, I strategically put that tank is located on the driver's side between the wheel wells in that cavity just underneath the van. I'll insert a shot of that. And that's because my batteries, which are AGM batteries in that build, I have two 6-volt AGM batteries. Those batteries alone, they weigh about 210 pounds. And those batteries are on the passenger side of the van. So my plan was that by putting those on one side, I wanted to have that 200 pounds of water storage on the other side of the van to kind of balance it out. So that's something you sort of want to think about, because water, it weighs about 8 pounds per gallon. So if you're looking at carrying 30 to 40 gallons of water, you're looking at carrying, 240 to 300 pounds of water weight. And that all goes and adds towards your vehicle's GVW, which is the gross vehicle weight restriction of your vehicle that you can legally and safely put in that van. So if you take a look, I haven't done a video yet on my 144 layout, so I'll save that for another video, but if you take a look here, you'll see that on the driver's side of my vehicle, underneath the bed, that's actually where I plan on locating the whole electrical system. So on this van, the whole electrical system and most of the heavy components are located on the driver's side. So on my new van, I've actually located the 32-gallon over the wheel well tank. That's on the passenger side of the vehicle. And the reason for that is, one reason is it helps evenly distribute the weight, so that's a perfect, and just with my layout, it's easier to put it over there. So if you made it this far in the video, obviously you found it interesting. It would mean a lot to me if you click that subscribe button down below, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I enjoy putting these videos together. It helps me kind of work through the decisions that I've made and make sure they're the right decisions. And I enjoy just helping other people out, because I know when I built my van, it is really helpful to get other people's opinions and views on why they made the decisions they made. So again, I hope you found this video super helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.